Um, so let's talk about Ibogaine next. You've got an episode coming up about Ibogaine. There's a lot of really interesting research going on related to Ibogaine. What is it? Where does it come from? What do we know about it today?
So Ibogaine is an alkaloid from a shrub that grows in central West Africa called Tabernanthe iboga. The shrub has a root that's rich in a number of different alkaloids, and the most abundant, most studied, most prominent one is ibogaine, although there are others. And although you hear a lot of discussion of the entourage effect in the psychedelic community or similar types of effects, I think that often these effects are not really evidence-based. It's more of a sort of like materialist vitalism that people are imposing on the substance. But in the case of Iboga, there actually is a pretty strong case for the other alkaloids contributing. And the best piece of evidence for that is that ibogaine isn't even the strongest one. Ibogaline is actually a stronger compound than ibogaine. So anyway, it's a chemically fascinating series of alkaloids that this shrub produces. They're very structurally complex. They have a ring system that is synthetically challenging to produce, and a kind of three-dimensional structure that's really impressive. I mean, I don't even think you have to be a chemist to just look at the Wikipedia entry for ibogaine and take a look at that molecule and see that there's something really cool about it. And so these compounds, in addition to being chemically interesting, they have very complex pharmacologies at different types of acetylcholine receptors, NMDA receptors, serotonin transporter, and on and on and on. They also seem to release a number of neurotrophic factors. They have anti-addictive effects. They have psychedelic effects. They have borderline dissociative anesthetic effects. And they have also been centrally integrated into a religion called Bwiti.
And what is that? Can you talk about the religious context?
Yeah, it's a religion that is practiced primarily in Cameroon and Gabon.
So this is West Africa.
Yeah, Central West Africa, and and probably to a lesser extent in the DRC, and it sees it's a syncretic Christian religion. So they see the Iboga shrub as the tree of knowledge of good and evil described in the Christian Bible. And they worship Jesus among other things. And they have it's a very rich, very beautiful tradition. There's a wonderful, very rare book that was written about it by an anthropologist whose last name is Fernandez, called Bwiti, and you can probably find a PDF of it online. Highly recommended. He was kind enough to allow me to use a lot of his photographs in the piece. Mm-hmm. And I just think that, I've traveled to 33 countries, studying psychoactive drugs. And I have seen a lot of religions that have a drug component to them. And I would say that Bwiti is the most beautiful, the most rich, the most sophisticated, the most awe-inspiring of them all. I have just tremendous respect for everything that they have created there. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my entire life to use Iboga with these Bwiti practitioners in Gabon and to observe how they helped people in their community.
How did that transpire? How did you get involved? How were you able to do that? Did they take you right in?
Yeah, they did, because they're really proud of their, in the same way that, people are often proud of their religions.
Yeah.
In the meth episode, all the Christian people that I was interviewing were extremely, extremely happy to talk about what they were doing. And believe it or not, they loved the episode. That the preacher from that Christian church, his only response to it was he wants a signed copy of a DVD. He loved it. I think that religion is really central to the lives of a lot of people, and they have a lot of internationally, people have a lot of pride in their religious practices, and it's a central point of community gathering. It's a point of spiritual transcendence. It's a point of support. And so they were happy to allow us to be a part of it. Their really only objection was that some of the people working on the camera crew weren't taking Iboga. But other than that, they were really happy with the whole thing and very, very helpful. And those interviews, I wish I could have cut this. I mean, one of the tragedies of making these things is that, each episode is only an hour long, a television hour. And there's so much amazing stuff that I would love to include. People say, why didn't you include this? Why didn't you? Well, I would love to. I wish that one in particular, I wish could have been longer, because there were so many amazing things. The shamans that I was interviewing were so tired. I've interviewed countless people. I've never in my life interviewed people that did this. They were so tired that I would ask them a question, they would answer it, and then they would lose this. And then they would wake up for the next question, because no one is sleeping, no one is eating. They're dancing for 15 hours a day. I mean, it's a feat of incredible endurance. And I think that there's an implicit lesson contained within the ritual, which is one of self-reliance and a sense that you have what you need to survive. You don't need drugs. You don't need sleep. You don't need food. You don't need water. You don't need to pee. You don't need any of the things that you think you need. You have it all inside yourself. And that idea is transmitted to everyone inside the church and the people that are struggling with addiction, which is another thing. When I was making this, my idea was, most Iboga documentaries that got addiction follow a white person who is addicted to heroin, and they show how a white person is using this African shrub to treat their addiction, which is fine. Every people of all races should get to use to enjoy the medical benefits of this plant. But what I found ironic and somewhat unfortunate is that this is a plant with a history in Central West Africa that now has a serious problem with opioids that, unlike the United States, they've never had opioids before. So, we can talk all day about how no one knew oxycodone was addictive, and this is a popular talking point in discuss the so-called opioid epidemic. They'll pretend that no one knew opioids were addictive. I am pretty confident that people did know that opioids were addictive, as people just keep repeating that all day as if doctors didn't know there was a big curveball. Oh, wow, oxycodone was addictive. Who could have predicted that? Whereas that is a valid argument. People have no culture. They haven't grown up watching depictions of heroin addiction on television and in movies. They have no culture of opioids at all. And then a extremely inexpensive synthetic opioid, tramadol, becomes widely available, and the results are potentially catastrophic. So what I wanted to do was show the use of Iboga as a treatment for opioid addiction in the same region where this plant actually has a history, because it struck me as ironic that everywhere else in the world, if you talk about Ibogaine, it's only known as the drug that is a treatment for heroin addiction. Yet in this part of Africa that it now is experiencing a surge in problematic use of tramadol, people are, for the most part, not using it for that purpose. It's still like a religious sacrament. So that's changing. And that was what I was trying to depict in this piece, was to show the changing environment where the traditional practices are transforming to incorporate the ultimately American, ultimately New York-based idea that Iboga or Ibogaine can be used as a treatment for opioid dependence.